Hey, welcome to a brand new series. All right, so over the next months or so, I'm going to give you the keys to rewire your nervous system, your body, your identity for more clients, more money, and more peace. So, this is part one of nervous system reset and the frequency of overflow. And today's going to be a little longer than the rest of this series because I'm doing both the intro to the series and then I'm going to really do part one. So it's kind of like 2-in-1 today. We're doing the intro and then I'm going to talk to you about reclaiming your innate wholeness, reclaiming who you were meant by divine design, and remembering the empowerment of your most creative, magical child. So the way it's going to work is we're essentially every few days, I'm going to come in and I'm going to drop another part. So part 2, part 3, my feeling based on the notes I have taken at this point is that it's going to be 7 or 8 parts. I haven't decided whether the last bit I want to include or I want to make its own thing. We'll see. What I want for you is more visibility, more clients, more money, more ease, freedom, and peace. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you all the different aspects that I do in my work with clients to create that. When clients come to me, usually something is happening that for them that feels constricted or blocked, either internally or externally or both. Like they can feel that there's an internal sense of constriction and contraction, and that there's also something happening externally where the flow feels blocked, like nothing's moving. So that can show up in a number of ways, like suddenly their sales has dried up, or they're experiencing overwhelm and anxiety even when things are okay, or they're not sleeping, or having nightmares, even though things are actually decent. They've hit some kind of upper ceiling financially that they can't seem to move past, no matter what they do and no matter how much pushing and hustling and efforting they put into it. Or maybe it's that sense of feeling like an imposter, or continuously second guessing themselves, or even feeling like a failure, even though they have accomplished a whole lot. So usually what's happening is they want to make some kind of bigger impact or have a bigger expanded experience, but they're struggling to claim their identity, their voice, and essentially they're struggling getting to that next level in some ways. You get the drift. In some way, shape, or form, their capacity to create and to receive and to hold more is constricted, and they're not able to experience any sense of satisfaction, joy, peace, freedom, and flow in the process of creating the life, business, wealth that they desire. And so when I'm working with clients on these things, there's like recurring areas of focus that come up over and over and that we use to unlock their nervous system and to increase their capacity to receive and hold more. And it doesn't matter if more equals more visibility or more clients or more money or more ease and freedom in the process of holding the bigness that they've created. So what I'm going to do today is focus on one part of this, and that part is the remembrance and the reclaiming of your original design and your innate wholeness. Before I dive in, I want to take a minute to welcome you to this new series and introduce myself. So, if you're new here, welcome. I'm really excited to have you and to take you through this. If you don't know who I am, I'm Ilsa. Personally, I'm a total spiritual nerd. I'm a bookworm. I'm an introvert, bordering on a little bit of a hermit. I'm a nature lover. I live in Boulder, Colorado with my husband and our 2 dogs. And I have a pretty quiet but deeply satisfying life. Essentially, the hermit, the introvert in me. On a professional level, for over 20 years, like 22, 23 years at this point, I've worked with hundreds, many hundreds of clients in my role as a psychotherapist, a healer, an expansion expert, and a strategist. I marry nervous system and brain rewiring work with energy, identity, and strategy to help leaders and business owners tame the chaos, both internal and external chaos, and dissolve any kind of resistance that is occurring internally so that they can rewire themselves, their lives, their businesses for easeful growth, for consistent results, for joy-filled wealth and exciting new levels of freedom, both personal freedom, professional freedom, and financial freedom. So if you're looking for that, if you're looking for more ease, more joy, more freedom, more abundance, then you're in the right place. And if you want to go deeper, like after this training, you're like, I want to go deeper, then I want to invite you to look in the description of this training. It will have information on how we can continue this work. And you're going to find a couple different offerings, some free, some paid. Oh, and by the way, as you're listening to these training, like, let me know what's coming up for you, or feel free to say hi to me. I always love hearing from you. All right, let's get started. So I want to give you a little background of how I came to this work and why it's so important to me. So receiving rather than achieving became a focus for me because I saw in my own life, as well as in so many of my clients' lives, this pattern that was showing up around kind of like overgiving and working ourselves to death. Maybe not literal death, but literally a death of spirit, a death of soul and joy, a death of rest and ease and satisfaction. Almost like we were overcompensated for God knows what, and moving through our lives, through our business, like we were having to prove ourselves worthy and good enough. One of the things that was happening with me, and this we're going back quite a few years ago, maybe 12 years ago, I was continuously and chronically overextending myself, both energetically, but also mentally, physically, for way too little. And what ended up happening is I got sick. I ended up losing a bunch of weight. For some reason, I wasn't creating any saliva anymore. I was anxious all the time and having panic attacks. And finally, I went to the doctor, and they did a bunch of tests. They couldn't come up with anything tangibly wrong with me. And in the end, he said to me, this is stress, this is burnout. And it's essentially some kind of autoimmune response that has been brought on by my life and by my state of being. And if there's nothing he could do, but if I didn't get this under control, he more or less said to me, you're going to really get yourself sick and you're going to lose all your teeth, which was not something I was looking forward to, as you can imagine. So I ended up having to really take a pause, take a look at my life, and start doing things in a different way. And the worst part of it all is that for all that stress I had, like I was working at all times of day, on the weekends, like I was people pleasing left and right with family members and caregiving everyone. Like for all the stress, for all the hustling, for all the work, I really didn't have much to show for it. My income was stuck at a plateau no matter what I did. I wasn't enjoying my life. I had no energy or time really for a social life. So there was no sense of freedom. My relationship to my husband, my marriage felt disconnected. And so, I had this moment of like, what the fuck is this all for? What am I doing? I'm killing myself for a life and a business I don't actually want. And so that was my own personal wake-up call. Not all of you will have something like that. For some of you, it's simply you're still in that phase of excitement and you're really wanting to grow and experience more ease in the expansion process. And if this is you, then you're going to get what you need here too. But this is especially for you if you are on the brink of burnout, you feel like you've been sabotaging yourself, and you feel like essentially there's no flow in your life and nothing that you're doing is actually really working. And the shift here is to come out of a pattern that leads us to create lives, businesses that don't actually fulfill us, don't provide the results we want, but actually drain our soul dry. So for me, that was the shift. And a lot of the practices that I teach my clients came from this phase like 12, 13 years ago, where I really turned towards, even though I was a therapist and I knew about the nervous system, I had never thought about using it for myself. For me, the nervous system work was for people who had trauma only. And I never thought of using it for myself. I never thought of using it in my business to change patterns of overgiving, under-earning, people-pleasing that were showing up there. And so I started really working on myself, both at this somatic level as well as an identity and energetic level, and everything shifted. The good news is obviously I still have all my teeth. Literally, I think like the symptoms that I was experiencing disappeared within 5 weeks of me making some really tough changes at that point. Like I fired a bunch of clients, I changed my schedule around so it fit me. I had some interesting conversations with my husband about what needed to change. I had some interesting conversations with family members about not being available the way I have been. Like essentially, I gave myself permission to make my life about me. So because essentially for me, my body was kind of like falling apart, I had to really shift my focus away from creating results and growth to alignment and to like shifting the quality of my experience rather than the quantity of my experience. So for me, I really moved towards feeling safe day in and day out, feeling nourished by my days and what I was doing. And I realized during that time how much of our conditioning around overworking, people pleasing, overcompensating is actually what contributes to the constriction in the flow. It's what contributes to the blocks and our lack of results. So the moment that I really started moving from a place of ease, from a place of rest, making joy, making play, making pleasure, like at the core of what I was doing and choosing and deciding in my life and in my business, that's when actually, even though I was doing less, even though I had stronger boundaries and working less, I actually started making more money. And I ended up making more with significantly more ease, more freedom, and more free time. And so that's what led to really diving deep into essentially like shifting these conditioned patterns of oppression and pressure, and really shifting the nervous system and playing with what is this frequency of overflow? How do we create and have the life and the business that we want from a place of rest, from a place of nervous system capacity, from a place of feeling so damn regulated, relaxed, and resourced that literally being rich, just is the happy ripple of that. Nervous system work is an entire journey, and it affects everything from your body and your health to your money. It's a complete path. And for me, it was truly a journey of awakening. When I work with clients through the nervous system, what we're really playing with is moving out of contraction and constriction to first regulation, feeling safe, feeling grounded. And then we move into relaxation and liberation, a sense of freedom. And then finally, we step into the domain of expansion. So over the next few weeks, through bite-sized trainings, this, by the way, as I said, is going to be the longest training. The other ones, I'm going to try to keep between 5 and 15 minutes so that it can be real quick and simple for you to move through this entire series. I'm going to take you through these mini trainings through a bunch of different aspects that you can use to heal, to reprogram, to reclaim yourself, your life, and to rewire yourself for deeply satisfying and sustainable results and a brand new, completely expanded receiving reality. My invitation to you over these next few weeks is to become curious as to which aspects you might need more work in, which aspects you need to cultivate in your own life, in your own business, to rewire your nervous system for more and to embody this new paradigm that we're going into, where receiving and money doesn't get to be made, it gets to be received, where rest doesn't get in the way of productivity, it actually enhances it. All right, so let's do part 1. So part 1 is all about remembering and reclaiming our divine design, our innate wholeness, as well as remembering and reclaiming who we were as children before we were conditioned, before we were wounded into smallness. The truth is that many of us are haunted by the messages that we have received from our family, from our community as children. Messages about who we are, what is safe, what we deserve, what we're capable of, worthy of. For a lot of us, for most of us, we come into adulthood with the weight of that conditioning, with the weight of the wounds, the disappointments, the rejections, the betrayals, the abandonments that we have experienced. And that is at a minimum. Some of us come into adulthood with the weight of neglect, of abuse, and trauma. And these wounds, whether it's little t trauma of your dog passing, or kids being mean and bullying you, or your mom having, I have a client of mine who shared this story. Her mom was having a headache and she was singing, and her mom snapped at her and basically said to her something like, "You have the worst voice possible. Stop singing. You're giving me a headache." And the truth is, mom was probably tired and mom already had a headache and she snapped. But literally, my client has lived her life from the perspective that her voice is ugly and no one wants to hear it, and she's not wanted, or her voice is not wanted. So these wounds, they create nervous system contractions. And these contractions are essentially put in place to keep us safe from further hurt or disappointment. So for example, for my client that I just mentioned, for her that showed up as not speaking up, for her that showed up as not wanting to do live videos and speak up, because there was a sense that if she spoke up, if she actually, people heard her voice, she would be criticized, she would be attacked. And so she was protecting herself through that contraction. So that's the first step you want to understand, is that all these contractions you have inside you, they're not the enemy. They were actually a process that came up to keep you safe. But they're also, unfortunately, the very thing that keep us small, that keep us silent, that keep us invisible, that keep us stuck in patterns of underperforming, under-earning, overgiving, hiding, people-pleasing, compromising. For the entirety of your life, every time you've been hurt, every time you've been disappointed, you've been shamed, you've been punished, you've been judged or criticized, every time you've had a setback or you let yourself down, some small part of you, a little piece of your power and self-worth has been lost, has gone into hiding, has shrunk on itself. And every time that has happened, a piece of your life force, a piece of your magnetism has essentially become contracted. What we find for most of us when we look back to who we used to be as children, we find that we went from being a force of nature, a being who felt like in oneness with life, who felt in control of their fate, to a being who feels small and feels at the mercy of fate. And so a lot of this nervous system work is actually about unwinding these knots, these wounds, these contractions in the body, in our system, so that we can go from feeling at the mercy of fate to feeling like we are the master of our fate. And so here you are, you're an adult, you've got big dreams, but you've got all these internal knots, all these wounds that have literally like collapsed one on top of the other. And what's happened at this point is that you don't trust yourself fully, and you don't feel safe being truly and fully you in this world. And so that lack of self-trust and that lack of safety being you and being here has essentially constricted the way you move through life, the way you show up, the way you make decisions in your life, in your work, in your health even, and also, of course, in your wealth. And usually that's why growth and expansion feels hard, or that's why we make it hard, because we are compensating. And that's also why we are exhausted, because we're trying to essentially achieve big dreams, big goals, with a huge chunk of our life force locked up. And so a lot of this work is about unlocking ourselves. All right. Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. One of the things to keep in mind here is that, unfortunately, the way evolution has designed us, like your brain, your nervous system, your body is not wired to imprint wholeness. It's not wired to anchor in wins. You are wired through the evolutionary process to imprint wounds and losses. And so what happens is that even though you've probably had a ton of success, a ton of accomplishments, a ton of wins, you've had proof of your brilliance and your worthiness along the way, tons of proof. None of that shit actually sticks. It's the failures, it's the disappointments, it's the criticism and the rejections that actually end up sticking to us. And so part of what we're doing with this work is especially with part one is a lot about like wiping the slate clean, like coming back to who you used to be before all that conditioning, before all that wounding, before you started to doubt yourself and to doubt that you were wanted, that you were important, that you were here for a big purpose. And so we're wiping the slate clean, and we're coming back to that foundation, to that innate wholeness, to our divine design, so that we can start to move through life and shift the way our brain and our body and our nervous system is wired. And we can start to make the wins and the accomplishments count just as much or more and be anchored in our being than the setbacks, the disappointments, the hurt, and the failures. So part one is really the reclamation of who you are. And the answer is never doing more. Because until you remember who you are and you do the receiving work to feel safe and worthy having more, even if you do more, you're doing more from that place of lack. You're doing more from an energy of not feeling good enough. And you're doing more from a felt sense of having to prove or improve yourself. And because of that, if you've followed me at all for any length of time, one of my favorite saying is that the seed always bears the fruit. This is a saying I got from my own mentor, meaning you cannot create expansion from contraction. You cannot create abundance from lack. So if you're actually moving through your business, moving through your life, if you're busy doing a whole bunch of shit, but you're doing that from a place of constriction, from a place of not feeling enough, from a place of scarcity, all you get at the end is more scarcity, more sense of not being enough. So the only way to move into effortless creation and receivership is to reclaim all the pieces of you that have gone missing along the way, all the pieces of you that have gone dormant to protect themselves along the way, all the pieces of your power and your life force that have been locked away, and to reclaim them, and re-embody them. That, my friend, is true healing. This work is about coming home to you and to the fullness and wholeness of how you were designed. So in this first part, at this level of the work, we are working on discovering the inner parts of you that have gone into hiding, that have shrunk unto themselves, that have become armored or put on masks, that have essentially gone dormant or have started to play really small because it was scary to be big, it was scary to be here. And we start to provide them with what I call the missing experience. And when we provide them with the missing experience, what they needed back at the original wound, then we reclaim our wholeness. We suddenly start to make it safe for every piece and part of us to come forward and to be fully engaged in life. So at this level of the work, you start looking at all the pieces and parts of you, like your creativity, your playfulness, your sense of confidence and certainty. You look at everything that essentially has shrunk, and you start to get curious. What does this part of me need to feel safe, to feel whole, to feel worthy, to feel free? And you start to provide that. Obviously, I can't do that with you in like a half-hour training, right? Like this is the work I do with clients. This is, by the way, that missing experience, that discovering which part I've shut down or become armored or shrunk, and providing that missing experience is very much part of regulation. That is essentially what regulating the nervous system is all about. And then when these parts of you start to feel really, really safe, then they start to relax and they start to move into what I call the liberation phase, because they start to feel free to show up, free to be themselves, free to express. In the end, every part of us wants the right to exist and to reach its highest potential. But for that to happen, there needs to be a place of safety for it to do that. There needs to be a place of remembering that we were always enough from the get-go. So what you do in this first part, at this level of the work, is you're validating your own existence. You start to validate your right to exist, to be here. You start to validate that you belong here. How the fuck do I know you belong here? Because you are here. That is the only validation you need. Your existence is the proof. And what you're doing is you're meeting every hurt and wounded part inside you, and you are validating its existence. You are reminding this part of you that it has a right to exist and that it belongs here. And in doing that, you start to show it the way to its most expansive and actualized version of being. So I want to give you a journaling prompt at this point to start to help you connect the dots, right? So here's the journaling prompt for this first part. What experiences or messages have led you to believe that you were not enough, just as you were? What experiences, messages have led you to believe that you were not enough as you were, that it wasn't safe for you to be you and for you to show up as you? And start journaling. And if I say it from a me place, what experiences and messages have led me to believe that I was not enough just as I was, and that it wasn't safe for me to be me and for me to show up as me? And start looking at all the woundings, all the criticism that I've left an imprint, all the failures and setbacks that I've left an imprint in you. Feel how that feels in your body. Feel the part of you that because of that experience started shrinking, started moving to the back, started staying quiet. And literally like put a hand on your heart and start asking these pieces and these parts of you, what do you need to come back? What do you need to start to be fully engaged in this life again? What do you need to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel supported? What do you need to feel whole and worthy? And start opening communication with all these parts of you that essentially have gone dormant. They've been exiled through pain and hurt. So this is kind of like the first part of part one. Another powerful aspect of this work that I want to bring up, which is related to this, is something I call the Great Remembrance. And essentially, this is about, like, as an extension, when you start to heal all these parts of you that have shrunk, that have gone dormant, that have exiled themselves, that have gone locked and armored, and you start to free them, you start to bring safety, you start to reclaim what I call your magical child. Part of reclaiming that innate wholeness, of remembering our original divine design, who we were before we were wounded and conditioned for smallness and limitation, is to reclaim that sense of exuberance, of infinite possibility, of creativity that we had as children. Almost like remembering and reclaiming that fearlessness, that fierceness, that joyfulness, that confidence, that sense that most of us had as children, that we could do and be and have anything, that the world was our oyster, that anything you wanted was possible. There was a sort of, like when we talk about the frequency of overflow, that's the frequency of overflow. Like a sense of infinite possibilities, a sense that nothing can get in our way, a sense of aliveness and flow. Like when you look at kids play, they feel like they have like unceasing energy. Like, I live in a cul-de-sac, so we have a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and they'll play in the cul-de-sac. And man, they're running all the time. They're screaming, they're laughing, they're like for hours. I'm like, I'm fucking exhausted just looking at them. I don't even know how they do it. It's because none of those knots are there. They are literally the frequency of overflow. It's not even that they're tapping into it. They are it. So this piece is really about bringing back that aliveness, that sense of creativity, of inspiration, of infinite possibilities and potential from or of your childhood, and bringing that back into your adult self. So I want to give you another journaling prompt for this part. Can you remember a time where you felt like you could do and be anything, and the world was your playground? So I want to invite you to think back to this time and to journal, like what were the thoughts, what were the feelings, what were the sensations, what were the actions, the behaviors that you expressed and that you embodied at that time in your life, during those moments. Doesn't mean that you were that way all the time, right? But when you think back to a time where maybe you were playing and it was like time flew, and you like didn't think of anything. You were just in the flow of the moment. You were in pure joy and pure playfulness and pure creativity. What were the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations, the behaviors that were expressed, that were embodied when you were that field of infinite possibilities as a child? And like journal them, and then take some time to feel them now. Like take some time to start to reacclimate your body, your brain, your nervous system to that state of being, because that is the frequency of overflow. That is how you reset your nervous system. You essentially resetting your nervous system in many ways is a sense of feeling safe, but then it's a sense of remembering and reclaiming an old way of being. This is what this part 1 is about. Prior to conditioning, prior to wounding, prior to all the disappointments. And you might even play around with looking at different like circumstances in your life currently and ask yourself, how would your magical child respond to this? How would your magical child move? And essentially start to reclaim that innocent, free, like exuberant, confident part of you. It was who you were before all the stuff got added. Limitation is something that was added onto you. It is not who you are. And you'll notice that when you start to tap into that magical child and you start to ask, like, if I was fully embodied as my magical child, how would my magical child deal with this? How would they respond to that? You're going to find all sorts of spicy, bold, playful, certainty, confidence, flow, creativity is going to come through you. Things that you would never dare to say. Your inner child will say it. Things you wouldn't dare to try or experiment with, your inner child will want to play with it and see how it goes. So that is part 1. Resetting your nervous system and activating and anchoring the frequency of overflow by remembering and reclaiming who you were prior to setbacks, disappointments, and woundings. Essentially remembering and reclaiming your original divine design of wholeness and fullness and aliveness. And remembering and reclaiming that innate sense of infinite possibilities, infinite self-worth, infinite creativity and confidence of your childhood. So I'll be back in a few days with part 2. And in part 2, we're going to dive into the role of the body in activating overflow and increasing your capacity to receive. If you want to know more, if you're ready to expand out of contraction and activate your most powerful and peaceful presence so that you can receive in and with overflow, then I would love to work with you. In our work, we'll dive into a journey of quantum expansion, and I'll help you embody a new paradigm of being deeply regulated, relaxed, and resourced so that you can receive easefully and be rich. So to find out more about what that might look like, just check the description of this training. You'll find a couple different options. It would be my great honor to put my 22 plus years of experience as a psychotherapist, a healer, an expansion expert, and strategist to work for you and your own becoming and your own expansion. All right. I'll see you in a few days for part 2.